Hello again, friends, and you are my friends, and welcome back to another Meet the Opposition as we build up to this weekend's big game away at Wolves. I'm joined by Dave from Talking Wolves, who will provide the scouting report on all things Wolves, give us the latest of the ins and the outs that are going on at Molineux. So, before we do, don't forget, we are partnered with the East Anglian Air Ambulance. You can support their life-saving crucial work by playing their weekly East Anglian Air Ambulance lottery. The easiest way to play is online. Sign up now for just £1 a ticket for a chance to win one of 18 weekly prizes ranging from £50 to £1,000. Players must be aged 18 or over. Please be gamble aware. So I started by asking Dave from Talking Wolves the most obvious question. Is this Saturday a must-win game? It is, isn't it?
Yeah, it feels like I've said that for the last number of weeks, really. I remember when, I don't know if there was the last international break or the international break before. It's just all merged into one now. But we had a really poor defeat against Brentford. And then I think there were a lot of questions to be asked about Gary O'Neill's position as manager. And then we went through like a bulk of fixtures where we looked at it and I think we should be getting points for every single one of these games on paper, really. And it obviously hasn't gone that way. And now we're almost at the end of that cycle and we're still one from bottom. We're still in a really poor position. We've got yourselves, we've got Leicester next week, and then we start the tough fixtures again. United, Spurs, Villa, to kick off the sort of Christmas and New Year fixtures. So, yeah, Wolves have got to win this game. It's been an absolute disaster of a season. You've probably seen things that have happened sort of off the pitch for us as well. But yeah, at home, form's not been brilliant, but this is really a must-win game for Wolves.
With 9 points on the board, you mentioned those the next two games being us, Ipswich Town and Leicester. Then you've got some tough fixtures coming up. Is there a way Gary O'Neill can chart a path through this?
He's got to. I was almost speechless over the last 2 weeks that he's still in a job, to be completely honest. And I think, unfortunately, what it is that the Wolves owners and the board do not want to back whoever is going to take the job. So we had news yesterday, the managers that they'd spoken to, and it's been pretty public that they have looked elsewhere. And the managers that they've spoken to have obviously said no because they're far too high profile to, one, get into a relegation battle, and two, join a club that they're just not going to be backed. So it would be some turnaround if Gary O'Neill could somehow get the fans and the club back on side, to be completely honest. But they've said he's in charge for the foreseeable future. He's pretty much a glorified caretaker manager at this point because they're obviously looking for alternatives. So, yeah, it's been a disastrous season. But these two are massive because if Wolves again go into Christmas with no wins out of Ipswich and Leicester, and you're going into games such as United and Spurs, I think relegation looms, to be completely honest. The Wolves are in a really sticky situation at the moment if they can't be getting points from these next two games.
Yeah, I feel like you're viewing it the same way Town fans were viewing our previous two games. We went into Palace and Bournemouth back home games thinking this is a real opportunity to use it to springboard, and perhaps you're thinking the same with us and Leicester coming up. If you can't get some points on the board here, it's going to be a real struggle over the Christmas period.
Yeah.
But can all the blame be placed at Gary O'Neill's feet? Is it his mess, or is it more of a above him situation?
It's a bit of everything, to be honest, because I think ultimately when the things aren't going well on the pitch, you look towards the manager straight away. Sure. And then I think after the West Ham game, where a lot of people said we're unlucky, look, yeah, we probably should have got at least one penalty. There's a couple of dodgy VAR decisions in that game again, which Wolves seem to always have. But and then he sort of gave quite a passionate post-match interview afterwards, and a lot of Wolves fans started to side with Gary O'Neill all of a sudden, although they've been sort of slating him for the last number of weeks. But I think, yeah, the issue is at the top, and it started from the summer, really. We raised our season ticket prices considerably, so there was a real backlash on that straight away. So there was a little bit of a sharpness going into the season. We weren't too sure what the atmosphere and so on was going to be like. They backed Gary in the summer, but we made a lot of money. We sold players such as Neto and Kilman, and the two high-profile ones, made a lot of money, spent some, but there's still there's a big pot of money sat there that Wolves haven't seen yet. And they've made it pretty public they want to be a self-sufficient club. So basically, whatever they're spending, they've got to be bringing that back in sales. So it's difficult for a Premier League team to operate in that way. Very, very difficult. And like I said earlier, that's why managers don't want to join Wolves. But things, the wrong things have been said from the chairman and the board. They've really lost the connection with the fans, to be honest. And I honestly feel our team on paper should be good enough to stay up, but sometimes that's unfortunately not how football's played. And when you've got a lot of noise outside from the fans, from the management, things can only end one way. And I don't like to think about it, but it just feels like it could end like that for Wolves this season.
Yeah, I saw a stat that said, teams that have considered a certain number of goals by this point went on to get relegated, and obviously Wolves have conceded that magic number, if you like. Not magic if you don't want to get relegated, but when things aren't going well, crowds can turn. You mentioned some of the stuff going into the season. What's the overall sort of mood of the fans? Like, if Town score early on Saturday, is it going to turn? I don't want to use the word toxic, but is it going to turn really negative? I'll use that.
It will be. I think it'll be nasty. And the last few games, I think, we beat him Fulham 3 or 4 games ago. We beat them 4-1, which was a bit of a shock result. Again, like I said earlier, I think we could give a lot of teams a game, and I thought we'd give them a good game, and it was close. They went down to 10 men due to injury, and we just put them to the sword and got a really nice 4-1 win. And after that, you think, right, we're going to build a bit of momentum. And then all of a sudden we lose 4-1 to Bournemouth at home, which was quite toxic there. We lost 4-0 to Everton away, a team who hadn't scored in 4 games before then. And then obviously most recently lost 2-1 away to West Ham. So there is a lot of negativity going into it. Before this week, and obviously still this week, 99% of Wolves fans probably wanted Gary O'Neill to be moved on. They haven't found the alternative. He's going to be staying for the foreseeable future. So I think there will be a lot of negativity. I think a lot of it will be placed towards the board, especially if Wolves don't start too well on Saturday. I think we've got a knack of conceding early goals, to be honest. So I think if you score early, it could be a nasty place, Molineux on Saturday. But I don't know. I hate to think negatively because I'm normally very, very positive going into these football matches. And this is going to be a close game. I think Wolves do have enough quality that they should give Ipswich a good match, but we just don't know which team's going to turn up. We've got a Wolves team like we saw against Southampton a few weeks ago where we weren't at our best, but we put them to the sword and, we scored 2 nice goals. Or you got a team, the Wolves team that rocks up at Everton and just looks like they haven't played together in 12 months. So hopefully it's the team that we saw against Southampton. And hopefully we can add a much needed 3 points to our tally.
Sounds like a real Jekyll and Hyde side where you're not quite sure which side.
I don't think Gary knows his best 11, which is crazy, really. I don't think
15 games in.
Well, exactly. That's the issue. I think he knows probably what his best 11 players are, but I don't think he knows what his best 11 team is. I don't think he's been able to find a team that works. We've got Andre, Mario Lemina, and João Gomez, who individually are fantastic midfielders, but for whatever reason, the 3 of them in a midfield just doesn't work because they're quite defensively minded. I think you need one that's a bit more attacking, got a bit more flair maybe, and it just hasn't worked. Yes, we've had a couple of injuries that he's been unlucky with, but I don't think he knows the best system and best tactic and best squad best lineup to get the best out of these players at the moment, which is a concern, like you said, this far into a season.
Yeah, obviously 15 games in, you should at least know your best 11, and it should be injury suspensions that are really causing the issues where you can't perhaps get them out. But, I hate to keep saying it, but obviously only 2 wins on the board. So there may be a series of way teams are hurting you. But I like to ask the question to opposing fans, so Town fans can know, how can Town best hurt Wolves on Saturday? What's been the most consistent approach by teams you feel this year?
Set pieces, we've been atrocious, and I think we conceded another one against West Ham on Monday, and I think even then I might be wrong by 1 or 2, but we conceded 15 or 16 goals from set pieces now, and I think the next team is like 7 or 8. Like we're miles ahead. Like
set piece coach.
We did, and he got sacked earlier this season, and that's why it's quite laughable because we had a set piece coach, a young lad, late 20s, who came in, who was formerly like an analyst at Man City. He came in during the summer. That was our first ever dedicated set piece coach, as you were. And when we played Brentford, they beat us 5-3, I think it was in the end, and a few goals were from set pieces. And all of a sudden, there was a lot of noise. I think a lot of people were like, right, we need to move Gary O'Neill on. And what they did was quickly shift the blame and sack this kid the next day. Really? But Wolves have got, or as bad, if not worse, at their set pieces since then. So, West Ham was another one. You can't, all well and good leaving one player unmarked, but to leave Souček unmarked to the back post is just criminal. He's probably the biggest bloke on the pitch, and he scored. So just frustrating. So set piece is definitely one, really. I think if you can keep Matheus Cunha out of the game, I think that's another one as well, because teams have seemed to do that last 2-3 games. He's been really poor, but the teams have kept him really quiet. If you allow him the ball, if you allow him to drive up the pitch with the ball, I think, there's going to be trouble. But really set pieces, I really hope this week Gary O'Neill's worked on them, but it wouldn't surprise me, if you've got some big lads in the area there, it's going to cause us all sorts of problems.
I'm famous for on our shows. I'm not happy with our set pieces at all. We've brought a set piece coach in the summer, Mark Hudson, and I just feel like we could and probably should be a little bit better at them. So I'm interested to see how it lines up Saturday. If that's a weakness of yours, let's see if we can exploit it. Certainly, we have been getting closer recently with set pieces, but close enough isn't good enough.
I'm sure you'll probably hit the jackpot on Saturday with some set pieces. Look anyway.
Well, from a Town perspective, I certainly hope so. Hold up, it's half time. You're still here. You're digging the conversation. So hit the like button, subscribe to Talking Town, and never miss a show in the future. Right. That's the conversation. What I like to do on these shows is just ask our subscribers if they've got any questions they want answered by the opposing fans. I've got a couple of questions from some of our subscribers. The first one really is, if Wolves get out of trouble this season, how do they kick on again next year to avoid becoming perennial strugglers?
I think I've had this conversation a couple of times as well. I think regardless of the situation with Gary O'Neill, say for argument's sake, we get to the summer or the end of the season and we finish sort of 16th, 17th or whatever, I think genuinely he's not the long-term head coach at Wolves. I think he probably has to be moved on. It's funny, and someone, it's sort of mutual with both clubs. Mick McCarthy, we had a very similar issue with, was when he was manager back in the Premier League. And it's easy to say in hindsight now, but the year before he got sacked, Wolves stayed up by the skin of their teeth. And a lot of people said we should probably move him on now if we want to progress as a football club. And he stayed. And unfortunately, we were even worse the year after, and he got sacked after losing to West Brom. I think that could be the thing here, is if we do end up staying up, I think Gary O'Neill has got to move on regardless. Although I think if we were to stay up, his second half of the season form must be very, very good. So he'll have a lot of momentum going into the summer. So it's a difficult situation. But I think the transfer model needs to change as well. I think it's all well and good being self-sustainable and so on. But like I said, as a Premier League club, you've got to spend money just to stand still, and as soon as other teams are spending more money, they're going to overtake you. And that's what we've seen from Wolves, from a team that 4 or 5 years ago were in the Europa League. 5 years ago today, we're in the knockouts of the Europa League, and now we're, on the brink of potentially getting relegated. So, yeah, I think a lot does need to change. I think the club and the board probably need a bit of a wake-up call going into the second half of the season. Yeah,
and as I say, if you do stay up, that's is O'Neill in charge. That's a hell of a second half of the season. So it'll be a really tough balancing act upon, is that lightning in a bottle, or is it time to move on?
It's a little bit like the Bournemouth situation he had. Obviously, he had he didn't quite get the job at the halfway point, but they started really poorly and had a pretty decent sort of 3/4 of a season. But ultimately, they obviously saw they weren't too impressed, and he wasn't the man to progress Bournemouth further, and it's worked out for them. So it'll be a difficult decision to be made, but I think, like I said at the start of the video, it'll be a hell of a turnaround if he somehow manages to get Wolves fans back on side now.
Yeah, and I laugh when you said he got to spend money to tread water, because obviously we spent 100 million, and I hear a lot of fans constantly, on our shows say that 100 million pounds should be doing a lot better, but that's nothing in the Premier League, and that's
exactly.
When you
especially
arrive,
for a team in your position that were in League Two, 2 years ago. League One. Sorry, no, sorry, yeah,
League, there, Dave.
No, League One. Sorry, yeah. For a team that were in League One 2 years ago, you would have had to spend that sort of money to even compete. I think so.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
In regards to your transfer policy, Mike D asks, from the outside looking in, it looks like O'Neill's been given players and just told to work with them. Is that true? In the sense of, I don't think O'Neill's had a chance to sort of select those players. What is the policy like?
Probably it's probably somewhere in the middle, I would say. Okay. I think Wolves have quite a unique idea or unique scouting network as such. They've got a lot of scouts that sort of have a keen on like South American football. So we have brought in more recently, we went from the Portuguese players to almost, Brazilian and sort of signed Paraguayan and stuff like that. So the South American model is one. And look, I don't think Gary O'Neill is going to say, oh yeah, let me sign Andre, Pedro Lima, etc. Straight off the bat. I think there is going to be any player Wolves sign is going to be with Gary O'Neill's, him accepting that and him agreeing to it. I don't think Wolves would sign players just for the sake of it. But definitely, I think there's influence on both sides.
Okay.
I am concerned there's one or two, like Andre. I think probably Wolves signing because it seemed too good of a deal to turn down, and not necessarily with Gary O'Neill and his squad in mind. But I think there's the truth is probably in the middle of that, really. Gary O'Neill will approve the signings, but a lot of it will be to do with who the director of football or sporting director comes up with, really.
Cunha has 7 goals. Larson's got 6. What can you tell Town fans about the 2 players?
Larson is an interesting one. He's probably the first proper number 9 we've had since we lost Jimenez to that nasty injury, really. We were very, very fortunate with Jimenez with how well he did. We never really had a backup for him. So we sort of played it quite risky. And then that head injury he had against Arsenal was the first real time we were without him. And we really struggled. We had young Fabio Silva. We've signed countless other strikers. It just hasn't worked out. So we've signed Jurgen Strand Larsen, who's doing really well so far. Getting gets a little bit of stick off Wolves fans. I think it's probably because he's not a pacey number 9 or loads of flair or whatever. He just does the dirty work, just the basic stuff really well. And he's managed to find himself on the end of a couple of loose balls and put the ball in the back of the net. So, scoring goals, which has been a real issue for Wolves over the last few years, to have 2 players on those numbers already is great. And Cunha, if you watch Match of the Day or managed to catch a couple of Wolves games this season, I think he speaks for himself. Such a fantastic player, really silky, really attractive to watch. Just real quality and starting to add the end product to his game with assists and goals now. He's been quiet the last few games, which just concerned me a little bit, but with the form that he was in before that, I think a lot of Premier League teams and a lot of teams around the world would have taken notice of him. So certainly on his game, one of the better players in the league. And if he turns up on Saturday, a real danger man for Ipswich to keep an eye on.
Last 2 questions for you. First of all, from Josh Russell, how much more time do you give Gary O'Neill, Dave?
I think I genuinely think his time's up anyway now. Like I said, I think the issue at Wolves have got is that there's nobody out there as good or better than Gary O'Neill.
Any names floated? Any names rumoured?
So the names apparently, which you probably laugh at some of these, the names that apparently Wolves approached during last month were Graham Potter, David Moyes, who I think would have been probably the 2 most popular choices. Conceição, who's the former Porto manager. Massimiliano Allegri, which is just a ridiculous shout anyway. And I think it's Niko Kovac, who was the former Bayern manager. So I think all 5. I think more. I'm surprised that with Moyes, I thought that maybe could happen. But other than that, I think your other managers are someone like Steve Cooper, which is just a light for light. I don't think he does anything for me anyway. And I don't think I'd change the whole hierarchy or the whole backroom staff just to bring Steve Cooper in. So I think that's the concern at the moment, But if I was the chairman and those managers have turned me down because I've got a policy in place, I think alarm bells would ring in my head saying, maybe I need to change what I'm doing to bring someone in half decent to make sure Wolves remain a Premier League team. So we may still have it, on the reverse fixture, I might be talking about another man in the dugout. I don't know, but I really don't know. It's going to be an interesting sort of few weeks before January because I think if you're going to swap managers, you've got to try and do it before the January window.
I'm amazed that a team inside the bottom 3, when the listed manager they've been linked with just didn't mention Sam Allardyce, because normally that name comes up whenever a team. And I'm not saying it's a serious link. I'm saying whenever a team's in the bottom 3,
he's a Wolves fan. Well, he was a Wolves fan when he was a kid as well, so it would have been a good link, to be fair. But
even in 2024, right? It's the first time you sort of hear from someone when the team's in the bottom 3. Oh, you know who you need. You need even now.
Big Sam. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's past that, but. No.
I'm not suggesting it, and I'm not saying it's a serious link. It's just when you listen to them off, I was like,
we're not that desperate. Yeah,
I'm sure in a reason to say the name that everyone normally says. Sam Allardyce. Every job in the world he's been linked with, I think, is Big Sam. All right, last question, Dave. Score prediction for Saturday. Now, I fully expect you to go for Wolves, but what do you think the score's going to be?
I will side with Wolves. We won't make it easy for ourselves. I think it'll be a 2-1 Wolves win. I think both teams will score. But yeah, our back is. But I'm concerned because I think if you guys get that first goal and it's fairly early, it could be a very difficult and a lot of toxicity at Molineux. So I will side with Wolves, but 2-1. Wolves are desperate, as are you guys, but we're absolutely desperate for the 3 points.
And there we go. What a great conversation. A huge thank you to Dave from Talking Wolves. Don't forget, we are live the moment the full-time whistle goes. Win, lose or draw, you'll get instant reaction to Saturday's game live at the full-time whistle. And of course, live 1 p.m. Sunday afternoon for a more in-depth look. Win, lose or draw, you'll get a full, honest analysis from Talking Town. Thanks for watching. Don't forget, like and subscribe. Have a great Friday night, great Thursday evening, great Saturday morning, whenever I chose to release this, whenever I got it done. But whatever you do, have a great one. God bless. Bye-bye.